Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I am Robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. By God, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify from across those 28 known galaxies. What an interesting day, or the last 24 hours have been, 2 days, as far as comic book news has gone, comic book movie news. I mean, if 2020 wasn't crazy enough, in terms of the movie announcements, especially if you're a comic book movie fan, which I am, lifelong DC comic book fan, you can see I have much Marvel and DC iconography surrounding me in the Robservatory. By God, by the way, it's a little hot today. I just want to make you aware that you're probably going to see me, as we like to say, schwitzing. It's a little bit of a schwitz in here. I know, I'm like dabbing my brow because it's damn hot. The air conditioner can barely keep up. Maybe it's because the news has me so giddy, just so fired up. I'm telling you, it's outstanding. And by the way, I have a little thing today. You know, I appreciate, before we get started, I just want to say I appreciate everybody that sends in super chats and tips and all that. And I figured today, just because it's so crazy, now, I do appreciate that today, but today, anybody who does send in a super chat or a tip for the channel, check it out. I have a brand new sealed copy of Arrow's 4K. Now, this is just the 4K disc. So everybody's entered, and it's it'll be a random giveaway drawing. I'll put everybody's name and I'll announce it on the show tomorrow. But this is not, obviously, this is the domestic 4K release. It is not the special edition. It is not the big Studio Canal box that I showed on the show the other day, because that's a Region B. But this is the 4K only release of Flash Gordon from Arrow. I'll give it away. There you go. It's a giveaway. So, and I'll announce that tomorrow. Anyway, I got to tell you, you know, there are times, the things that are going on in the world for us imagination connoisseurs, I've always said this on the show, we live in amazing times. And even though we might not be getting the Star Trek or the Star Wars that we want or we even deserve, even though we're not getting that, we still are getting amazing things. I mean, whether you're watching Umbrella Academy, we got The Boys dropping, there's movie news announcements all over the place. Even though COVID's here, we've got New Mutants is finally opening, Tenet is coming out, No Time to Die is still scheduled in November. We've got DC Fandom, which for whatever reason, they were going to have a special announcement to make that they pulled off the schedule. I think that special announcement was this announcement that they made today, which, I mean, barring the new Superman movie, which is what I thought they were going to, it never occurred to me that they were going to announce what they announced just mere hours ago, but here we are. We're living in incredible times, people, incredible times. And, you know, as I've said, humanity is better off now than we've ever been before. Remember, despite all the craziness in the world and all the horrors that human beings are still visiting upon one another, whether you're talking about camps in China, gun violence in Chicago, strife in the Middle East. I mean, look, that stuff's going on, you know? But if you look at things, apparently as, you know, let's go 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, humanity is much better off now than we've ever been. And as I've said on the show, remember, every single human being is a thermodynamic miracle, to quote Dr. Manhattan. It's amazing any of us exist at all. And think about it. In the entire infinitude of the universe, and if you start studying the real vastness of the cosmic void, you realize how utterly insignificant and meaningless your life really is as far as the universe is concerned, because the universe is indifferent to you. But you should take solace in the fact that in all of that, as Dr. McCoy said, and perhaps more, this was in Balance of Terror. If you ever want to feel good about yourself, there's only one of each of us. That, my friends, is amazing. Think about that. It is amazing that you exist. There is only one of you. There will only ever be one of you. I know, people with twins, okay, if you're Octomom, maybe. But there's only one of you. There's only ever going to be one of you. You, my friend, all of you, doesn't matter what you look like, what color you are, how you identify, there's only one of you, which makes you the most precious resource in the universe. And you're here for a short period of time. So I would say, never forget that. Never forget there's only one of you. And that makes your very existence is a miracle. You're a walking miracle. But what's so great about being a walking miracle is that when miraculous things happen as far as science fiction, fantasy, horror, or comic book movies are concerned, we are the only people that recognize that. We're the people that have to go back and go, we as walking miracles get to go, that, my friends, that is a miracle. Now, I'm not talking walking across water, turning water into wine miracles, but I'll tell you, with Hollywood contract negotiations the way they are, and egos the way they are, and studios run by multinational corporations the way they are, it's amazing anything gets done at all. And by God, today, I have to say, this, my friends, even I was taken aback. Let's just get right into it. And this news dropped. Now I've got to find, where did I put my news? Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. Here it is. My God. I can't even, I read this, I'm like, I can't even believe this. Ben Affleck to return as Batman in the upcoming Flash movie that will also feature Michael Keaton as the Dark Knight. Now, when I was a kid, like if you look over here, Crisis on Infinite Earths, the hardcovers, 15 hardcovers, my favorite thing in life when I was a little kid, literally, besides Star Trek and Star Wars hadn't come out yet, one of my favorite things in life was when, once a year, the Justice League of America would have a crossover with the Justice Society of America. Earth 1 would cross over with Earth 2. Man, and you'd see the little lineup that each character from the Justice League, each character from the Justice Society of America. I love this shit. So there were 2 Batmans and 2 Supermans. There was a time difference. It was like 30 years behind. I don't remember exact. 30 years, 25 years, something. Oh, that cold, tasty beverage. This truly lives up to its name. This black cherry and coffee sparkling water, man. As if I needed to be more amped up today. Oh, my God. I know some people don't like when I drink into the mic. I apologize. But the Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck are going to be Batman in the same movie with Ezra Miller's Flash, and they're doing the Flashpoint. Like, if you're a comic book fan, first of all, let me just tell you, folks. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this never, ever, 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 ever would have happened. A lot of ever-evers. You can put as many ever-evers in front of it. I mean, it would be like pi, 3.14 pi. That's how many ever-evers go behind this. Because, man, this is amazing. This is stunning news. We know Ben Affleck. Look, I think Ben Affleck, a man who had already made 4 great movies, 1 Best Picture for Warner Brothers. I understand at his age it's tough to work out and get into Batman shape. But I think Ben Affleck, as a smart guy who's now a 30-year veteran of the motion picture industry, even acting and working before that in Boston local theater or commercials, I'm sure he was a bit fed up with what happened on Justice League, seeing what happened. I mean, as somebody who's an auteur himself, seeing Zack Snyder leave, I'm sure the fact that Zack Snyder is going to be able to finally reinstate his vision of what he was doing, meaning he's going to make Ben Affleck look better. There's going to be more of his performance. I'm sure all of these miracles that we've been getting played into all of that. All of that. I'm absolutely sure that it did, because this is insane. This is insane. So Ben Affleck is playing Batman again in the new Flashpoint movie. And let's just read this article. First of all, let me put on everyone's favorite spectacles. Oh, these are just dirty. Sorry. This is on Deadline. Anthony D'Alessandro published this at 12:15, literally 2 hours ago. Sources have confirmed that Ben Affleck... Look at it, it's fogging up. I can't even see. Sources have confirmed that Ben Affleck is returning as Batman in the upcoming Flash movie, which Warner Brothers is putting into production. It is to be a cameo role. Who cares? He's still in it. And yes, Affleck will be playing the Dark Knight alongside Michael Keaton's Batman from the 1989 Tim Burton film in what is billed by Flash director Andy Muschietti as a substantial part. Andy "It" Muschietti. So he's Warner Brothers' boy. He's made him over $1 billion with the "It" franchise. He's a golden boy there right now. So he has the clout to get this done. And I think without Walter Hamada's leadership and Andy Muschietti directing this, it might not have ever happened. The Flash is scheduled for release on June 3rd, 2022. Ezra Miller, who played Flash in Justice League, plays the title role. Now, I know many of you are saying, well, Rob, this movie's had fitful starts and stops over the last 3 years. Why should we believe this? Why isn't this going to go by the wayside like anything else? Well, if Deadline's announcing it, I think the deals have probably already been made. Everybody already wants to do this. Warner Brothers has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars in development and paying. The directors have come and gone. The screenwriters have come and gone. They need to cover their losses, and they're going to make this film. And by the way, anybody who's a DC fan, this stuff, man, this is the kind of stuff we all live for. Despite being involved in early development on Matt Reeves' The Batman, Affleck stepped away from reprising the role in that movie in January 2019, as we first told you. Affleck reportedly got the script for The Flash at the end of last week and agreed to board the project. Now, when I read that kind of stuff, that makes me happy. Look, everybody wants to get paid, but Ben Affleck just signed on to direct the Making of Chinatown movie they're making over at Paramount. He didn't have to do this. Although, you know, with the Snyder Cut, I think there's a lot of goodwill. Affleck has come out in support of the Snyder Cut on social media. I think he's probably feeling pretty good knowing that a lot of his work that had been scrapped is going to be seen by the public because he busted his ass on that movie and on Batman v Superman. And to see this kind of a outcome is probably great for him. He is a very substantial part of the emotional impact of the movie. The interaction and relationship between Barry Allen and Affleck's Wayne will bring an emotional level that we haven't seen before. Muschietti tells Vanity Fair, who broke the news, it's Barry's movie, it's Barry's story, but their characters are more related than we think. They both lost their mutters. Hello, mutter. Hello, fodder. Here I am at Camp Granada. They both lost their mothers to murder, and that's one of the emotional vessels of the movie. That's where Affleck Batman kicks in. Another reason, feature mythology-wise, Affleck's Batman is coming back to The Flash, and that's that Miller's Flash considers him to be the original Dark Knight, the guy he fought alongside of in Justice League. Hence, per Muschietti, it was necessary to have Affleck's Batman as a starting point. He's the baseline. He's part of that unaltered state before we jump into Barry's adventure. There's a familiarity there, he further tells Vanity Fair. Warner Brothers is hosting a DC Fandom virtual confab with its superhero movies this Saturday with panels for the new Flash movie, Wonder Woman 84, Aquaman, Shazam, The Batman, Black Adam, Suicide Squad, and Wonder Woman 84. Gosh, I have to take my glasses off because I cannot see. This is sorry, I feel like Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now when he's on the PBR boat going up the Nung River to see Walter Kurtz. Every time you cut to him close up, he had like sweat dripping off of his nose. I feel that way right now. But you know, it's because it's over 100 degrees out here, and these are some hot days. So what are you gonna do? But anyway, how exciting is this, people? This is amazing. Now, here's a few things I love about what they're saying. Obviously, I love the moment where Ben Affleck and Ezra Miller as the Flash meet in Justice League. I hope to see more of that. The relationship that they developed was charming. And it makes sense that they have that's Ezra Miller's Flash thinks that Ben Affleck is his Batman. And when the Flashpoint occurs, when he goes into the multiverse and the history is changed or whatever, I think that adds the emotional resonance. I mean, what's it going to be like when he meets Michael Keaton's Batman? From a storytelling standpoint, think of this movie as a time travel movie, alternate history movie, because that's what it is. And we are getting the fact that we now have at the studio level that we have this kind of understanding and this kind of leadership and thinking is exactly what these franchises need. Marvel has Kevin Feige. The Walter Hamada administration over at Warner Brothers is cooking with gas, and I am sure they have learned from their mistakes. They're working synergistically with their filmmakers now. James Gunn, first example. Andy Muschietti, probably another example. They're allowing Patty Jenkins coming back to do Wonder Woman 84. They're doing the smart thing. And that's what you always want. You want filmmakers and you want their studio bosses to be synergistic in terms of how they approach this material. This would never have happened under the hot mess that Kevin Tsujihara's Warner Brothers became. So this is really exciting. And how I wish my beloved Star Trek would have this kind of synergy. Maybe Emma Watts will prevail, who knows. But this is incredible stuff. And I'm very, very excited. As somebody who loves time travel stories, who loves people meeting, obviously we saw Ezra Miller on the TV, the CW Flash. That was really cool. And it's established universe traversing, characters meeting characters. You know, I would not expect Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton to meet in the film. I think that's maybe a bit too much, but maybe it's the Affleck, there's wraparound segments or something. I don't, that doesn't bother me. I think that might be pushing it too far, because when you have those, as far as the verisimilitude of this kind of thing, look, as somebody who loves seeing Batman's crossover and Superman's crossover in the comics, it's a lot harder to pull off, I think, in a feature film in terms of the tone, because I'm sure what they've announced, it seems pretty serious, pretty straightforward as far as these things go. So I don't think Keaton and Affleck are going to meet in the movie, and nor do I think necessarily that they should. Now, I could be wrong about this. I don't know. I know nothing about this. I have not read the script. I have no access to it. I don't know. But it's nice to know that there's a script that people felt confident enough to send Ben Affleck, and that he read it, being the director that he is, and the Academy Award-winning screenwriter that he is. The fact that he agreed to sign on to do this, that's pretty cool. Pretty damn cool. But that is not where the coolness ends, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if you didn't think that was cool already, there is more cool stuff to report on. Now, I didn't go on yesterday. Well, let's go backwards. Another thing dropped. Let's go to the Sonyverse, who for the last 2 days has had huge, giant announcements. Huge announcements, ladies and gentlemen, as far as Marvel films go, as far as their Spideyverse is concerned. And I know a lot of you savvy viewers probably already heard this, but this also dropped. This dropped just before the Batman news. This dropped at 11:58. Justin Kroll reports on this. Marvel's KRAVEN the Hunter, a character that I've been saying will eventually make it to the Spideyverse, that I've said on the John Campea show. We've talked about this literally for years. Marvel's KRAVEN the Hunter movie at Sony eyes Triple Frontier's J.C. Chandor as director, which is funny because Triple Frontier starred Ben Affleck. So let's hear it for friends, directors J.C. Chandor and Ben Affleck, who had huge comic book news drop today on Deadline within 15 minutes of each other. I know Ben Affleck's probably not drinking these days, but maybe they should go out and get some socially distanced tea to celebrate. I don't know. Maybe a good Zoom call. This is amazing. I love Kraven's Last Hunt. J.M. DeMatteis, who I interviewed on a couple Mainframe Comic Cons ago, one of my favorite comic writers, he wrote that story. Even with Venom, Let There Be Carnage, Morbius postponed until 2021. Remember, there are 2 Marvel, Sony Spider-Verse movies that are coming out. They're both pushed in. We were already supposed to get Morbius the Living Vampire with Jared Leto. And then, of course, Andy Serkis's Venom sequel, Venom Let There Be Carnage. They're already done. Pushed into 2021. So KRAVEN's Last Hunt, one of the great Spider-Man stories of all time, is now going to get made. Sony Pictures is continuing to build up its slate of Marvel films. Sources tell Deadline that J.C. Chandor is in talks to direct Sony's KRAVEN the Hunter, the latest film to gain momentum in the studio's universe of Marvel characters. Sony had no comment. You know why Sony had no comment? Because KRAVEN's Last Hunt, or KRAVEN the Hunter, KRAVEN's Last Hunt, of course, is a Spider-Man story. KRAVEN comes to hunt Spider-Man. So the big question is Spider-Man going to be in this movie? Well, as I've always said, if Marvel only gets Spider-Man for 2 more movies, bringing him back into the Sony fold, this is the story to do it. This is classic. This is classic Spider-Man. This would be the time you bring Spider-Man back. Of course, they can't say anything about it. That's why Sony had no comment. because that's the one question every fan, boy and girl, and non-binary fan across the 28 known galaxies is going to ask. Is Spider-Man in it? They're not ready to answer that question yet. Sony's continuing to build a healthy development slate of Spider-Man characters to rival other studios' comic book picks currently in development. Besides Venom 2 and Jared Leto's Morbius, the studio also recently set S.J. Clarkson to direct its untitled Madam Web pick and tapped Mark Guggenheim to write its Jackpot movie. The next installment in the Spider-Man franchise also begins shooting this winter. Even before it set the new cinematic universe in motion, KRAVEN the Hunter is a property the studio has longed to make. Richard Wenk, who penned the Equalizer films for Sony, which I liked very much, wrote the script. The comic revolves around Sergei Kravinoff, a.k.a. KRAVEN the Hunter, who is one of Spider-Man's best-known and most formidable enemies, as well as the half-brother of the Chameleon. The character has appeared in numerous Spider-Man properties, including the popular story KRAVEN's Last Hunt. Chandler has been known more for his character-driven adult films like Margin Call, A Most Violent Year, and most recently Netflix's Triple Frontier. By the way, if you have not seen Oscar Isaac in A Most Violent Year, do yourself a favor and watch it. I know you're going to be like, Rob, isn't that a movie about a garbage strike in New York? Yes, but it's great. This would make his first time taking on a major studio tentpole. I love this. Chandler is a character-driven director. Great choice. Even though this would be his first big-budget feature, Chandler has shown the ability to pull off impressive set pieces like the car chase in A Most Violent Year that shows he has the chops to take on the type of action KRAVEN the Hunter would demand. This is amazing news. Now, I love the KRAVEN the Hunter storyline. I cannot believe that they're finally doing it. I mean, I can't believe it because I thought, well, they were always gonna do this. I mean, it was sort of look at that. You can see my brow is just. I have to mop my brow. Sorry, don't mean to gross everybody out. But this is incredible. Now, something I didn't even cover because I wasn't on yesterday. I was doing our weekly Prisoner show. Now, if you're not watching Heel versus Babyface, a.k.a. Az, and our show recapping Patrick McGowan's seminal 60s series, The Prisoner, what are you waiting for? We did Checkmate yesterday. We're going through episode by episode and doing our own order that we think is much better than the order, because the order for The Prisoner is very up in the air, but I was doing that yesterday. But what did I miss yesterday? My God, Olivia, that's the wrong one. Hang on, that's coming up next. Intimacy, that's right. So yesterday, if you didn't see it, Olivia Wilde coming off of Booksmart, a movie I thought was delightful in terms of its direction. She really did some interesting things as a director. I thought she knocked it out of the park for what she was trying to do. Again, authorship, she succeeded admirably. And I really did love what she did with Booksmart. Olivia Wilde tapped to direct an untitled female-centric Marvel movie at Sony. Justin Kroll reported on this at 3 in the afternoon yesterday. Sony Pictures is not only growing its slate of Marvel Universe characters, but is building on the female characters at the center of it, and looks to have landed one of the most sought-after female directors in Hollywood. Sources tell Deadline that Olivia Wilde has closed a deal to direct and develop a secret Marvel film revolving around a female character in the universe. While not confirmed, it is expected that the story will center on Spider-Woman. Sony had no comment. The film will be penned by Katie Silberman with Amy Pascal producing. Remember, Amy Pascal ran Sony, and now she left. She has a producing deal, but she's going to Universal too, so this is interesting. Rachel O'Connor will exec produce. Wilde, Silberman, and Pascal already have strong ties, and the three are working on a Christmas buddy film at Universal they hoped to do prior to this one. Gary Spinelli penned a previous draft of the script. The Spider-Woman character has actually been the alter ego of several characters in the Spider-Man timeline over the years, including Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane Watson, and Jessica Drew, who's my favorite Spider-Woman, who was the first to sport the costume in the late 70s. Since the concept is being completely revamped by Wilde, it's unknown the direction the studio will go with her. The project has been a high priority since the top of the year, and Wilde came close to passing on it, as her dance card has begun to fill up quite quickly. At the end of the day, the idea of having a chance to launch her own female superhero was too hard to pass up, and she eventually came around to fully committing to the project. This marks the second film based around a female character in Sony's universe of Marvel characters to land a director after S.J. Clarkson was tapped to direct a Madam Web movie. This was yesterday, people. Yesterday. J.C. Chandor is now the third, the triple threat. The hat trick, the trifecta. Is that what a hat trick is? 3, right? Around the industry, more and more female filmmakers are getting their shot at directing big-budget comic book movies. Nia DaCosta most recently landed the Captain Marvel 2 job at Marvel, and along with Wilde and Clarkson, will follow in the footsteps of Patty Jenkins, Kathy Yan, and Chloe Zhao, the latter who has the upcoming The Eternals. These women directors crushing it. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of Catherine Bigelow, and seeing female directors come on board and start making action films. A female director did The Old Guard. I thought she did a heck of a job. Actually, I think she was also black. So a black female director made The Old Guard. And how cool is that? Kicking ass. There was some great action. I thought The Old Guard was very, very slickly directed. I liked it. It's been quite the year and a half for Wilde, who, after spending the last decade as an A-list actress, decided to make her move to directing with the coming-of-age tale Booksmart. The film was one of last year's best-reviewed films and earned Silberman a WGA nomination for Best Original Screenplay. I mean, come on. This is very exciting news for all of you imagination connoisseurs out there. Cool stuff, right? So, remember, with your uniqueness in the universe, there's all this delightfulness out there that we can look forward to. I don't know where we're ever going to be able to get to see it, but hey, it's coming down the pike. We got female directors taking on big, big budget, huge tentpole properties for the studios, people of color. I mean, there's diversity, and I think these people are all qualified too. So that's great to see. And remember, Deborah Chow is taking on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series over on Disney Plus, which starts shooting soon. I mean, I'm telling you, people, we are getting some great, great stuff. And as an old white cis male, I do not feel any pressure. Because remember, people, it doesn't matter how good somebody else is. It doesn't make you any better or any worse. I truly believe that. So yeah, first of all, I got letters, man. I've skipped some days with letters, and I got lots of letters. So I'm going to jump right over to some letters here and then see what you guys are saying over in the chat. Remember, guys, girls, gentle people, if you do send me a tip today and you don't want this or you don't have a 4K player, just could you indicate that in your question, because I want to make sure somebody who can use this can get it, unless you want and give it to your best friend or whatever. But I cannot stress enough how great this transfer is. It's fantastic. I know it's photochemical, so it's not going to look like a Pixar movie, but it's pretty neat. Pretty neat. So, yeah. Let's see where we're at. I got so many good letters. So many good letters. Today. You guys never disappoint. Dean Mikitich. Dean is here. Dean all the way from the UK. Dean says, "Hi, Rob and the PGS. I've just seen the Bounding into Comics article on the new Star Trek rumors of shows being canceled and an internal power struggle between Emma Watts and Alex Kurtzman. Now, like you, I don't believe these rumors unless it has come from a legitimate source. Yes, I don't believe those rumors either. Viacom, CBS themselves, or a leaker that has been right on more than one occasion in the past. But for argument's sake, let's say the rumors are true and Emma Watson is able to get rid of Kurtzman in secret hideout. What would you think would be her first job of bringing Star Trek back from the abyss? Would she continue the Kelvin film universe? No. Or would she scrap it and start over? Return the original universe last seen on the big screen with Nemesis, or just put the films on hold? The same question could be said on the TV side. Would she make something new in the look of Kurtzman Trek, go back to classic Trek, or do something different? Emma Watts is very smart. She was over at Fox. She oversaw a number of franchise properties there. Here's the thing. I know what people say. They always say, well, the Kelvin timeline was wildly successful. It was not. The Kelvin timeline, those movies, Into Darkness cost more than $200,000, and with marketing, it was hugely expensive. Star Trek '09, people want to say it was $150,000. It was more expensive than that. 1,000. Into Darkness was over $200 million. Star Trek '09 was over $150 million, and so was Star Trek Beyond. These films barely made 3 times their budget. They wanted, like every franchise wanted, they wanted $750 million to $1 billion. They didn't get them. Do you know why they didn't get them? Star Trek is not a $1 billion franchise. It's never going to be a $1 billion franchise. And the idea that somebody is shooting for that, just like, as I've said before on this show, they're always trying to turn Star Trek into something it's not. They've tried Star Trek Lower Decks. Let's do a Star Trek comedy. Does anybody want that? I mean, there's going to be people that like Lower Decks, sure. But you know what I've been doing? And this seems strange. With Elizabeth, she's been going back and watching. She went all the way through the original series. Now she's almost to the end of the second season of Next Gen. and I've been sporadically dropping in and catching 2 or 3 episodes with her at a time. And it's amazing, and I realized something, even though as many times as I've seen Star Trek, there is an earnestness to Star Trek. And that earnestness is completely gone. Even in the, let's call them, less successful episodes of the first and second season of TNG, there's an earnestness to the stories that they were telling. All of that is gone. There is no earnestness. It's all a postmodern take on what Star Trek is. They're trying to turn Star Trek into something else. And my advice to Emma Watts would be that when you go back, and what she's doing is she's going to take Star Trek back. Here's why I don't necessarily believe she's at odds with CBS and Secret Hideout. CBS and Secret Hideout and Bad Robot have had their fingers in Star Trek. What Emma Watts wants to do is extricate those fingers, and she wants to start over with a new creative team. She wants nothing to do with Bad Robot and Secret Hideout moving forward on the film side. Now, I don't know this for sure, but this is what I would assume, that she wants to start fresh as any new studio executive would, so she can control the franchise. Remember, it was under her that movies like Days of Future Past and Logan got made. So she knew, I would give her that. She can understand franchise material. So she wants to start something new and fresh, something that is hers, that nobody has any control over. Because, look, whether you like new Star Trek or not, whether you think I'm an old man screaming on my Star Trek lawn telling you to get off of it, the fact is, none of the new Star Trek since 2009 has been as successful as they have wanted it to be. People can say, oh, Rob, it's successful. No. And the problem is, I'll tell you why. There is one problem with Star Trek besides the creative team. They're spending way too much on it. They're spending way, way, way too much on Star Trek. When you can look at a show like The Expanse, which an episode of The Expanse is half the price of an episode of Star Trek Discovery or Picard, and you have to ask yourself, which is delivering more interesting science fiction television programming? There's some great science fiction TV shows that are on now. And I'll tell you, they don't cost a fraction of what Star Trek Discovery costs. Well, maybe a fraction. But that's the problem. You need to get a new creative team that understands the earnestness of Star Trek storytelling. They should have some kind of canonical fealty to make Star Trek as a continuum that has been going on. I mean, and I'm not saying Emma Watts understands if she's probably asking herself, well, if you're such a continuity aficionado, then how do you explain X-Men Last Stand and Days of Future Past? How does that work? I don't know, but I'm sure that she's asking herself that question. But what you need is somebody that really understands Star Trek, but more importantly, can produce a Star Trek movie, a studio, a giant Star Trek movie that feels giant for less than $100 million. Maybe 125 million tops. Anybody who wants more than 125 million for a Star Trek movie, and then I would say even that's too much. See, the problem with these big franchise pictures is that they forget the original Terminator was made for $4.5 million. How much did they spend on Terminator Dark Fate? They don't have to spend this much money on these movies. And you need a production team of people that know how to make these movies cheaper. So I don't know if Emma Watts can terminate someone else's command or their contract. What she wants is she wants Star Trek unfettered for Paramount to go make theatrical features that they want to make that she can control. That's what I think. Would she continue the Kelvin film universe or scrap it and start over? She's going to start over. My vote is to go and do Eric Jedrinson's trilogy, Star Trek The Beginning, that takes place after Star Trek Enterprise and details the Romulan War. Brand new, exciting young characters that we can all get behind. You can have appearances from old established characters, that canonical characters such as Captain Archer or Shran or Soval from Enterprise. I'd bring all three of them back, not in huge substantial roles, because you've got these brand new exciting young people. Tell the story of the Romulan War. That is a self-contained 3-part Star Trek movie. Budget the whole thing. Make it, you know what? Budget the whole thing for $200 million. Make 3 Star Trek movies for $200 million because you're amortizing your costs. That's what I would do. I could do it too. With Jedrinson's script, I could make those 3 movies. But that's the way you have to do it. $200 million, 3 films. Shoot them all at once. And you know what? Whether they're going to call the new network Paramount Plus or whatever, they're always trying to launch Paramount's UPN with Voyager. Star Trek Discovery launches CBS All Access. Nope. Paramount Plus, that's the ticket. You make these 3 movies. If they don't go theatrical, make them for Paramount Plus. $200 million, 3 movies, Eric Jedrinson's scripts. I already covered Star Trek The Beginning on the show. As a matter of fact, with the help of Kevin Rubio, I threw that script back into the Paramount ecosystem, believe it or not. So it's floating around out there in the executive offices of Paramount. Maybe somebody will go for it. Who knows? They should. That's what they should do. Because all of these other people, look, I love Noah Hawley, but his last feature did not necessarily give me... Fargo's amazing. If I could see a sensibility that made the Fargo TV show work on Star Trek, that would be awesome. I'd love to see that. But again, his last feature film gave me pause. But I think that what you need, the great thing about Star Trek The Beginning and the Romulan War, that's something... And people are like, well, Star Trek, Rob, is not about war. Look, no, Star Trek can be about war. Star Trek, if you're telling a war story in the Star Trek universe, the story is, how do people from a utopian civilization maintain their utopian ideals in the face of the onslaught of war? That is still Roddenberry-esque, because the war is coming from the outside. And one of the great things about Star Trek Deep Space Nine is it maintained the core values of Star Trek, but at the same time dealt with what do people from a utopian civilization that there's no want. How do you deal with the Dominion, a power like the Dominion coming to wreck shop? I think and plus the Romulans, everybody would like to see that. It just has to be good. Personally, I think they need to put the brakes on the film side of the thing. We know Trek does not do well outside the States, with the exception of the UK and Germany and a few other places on the big screen. That's why you still make a Star Trek movie, but you do it a lot less. 3 movies, $200 million. And keep them all. I mean, when you amortize the costs, Star Trek The Beginning does not have to be totally expensive. Shoot most of it on location. Shoot it on sets. Don't cut down on the visual effects. Do what they used to do on Star Trek. Do what they did in Star Trek 2. I mean, does anybody think that movie didn't have enough special effects in it? What you do is you need somebody who really understands how to employ special effects, where not every shot is green screen. They don't rely on those things. Go back, use the Lucasfilm stagecraft technology. Figure out smart ways to work cheaper and work more effectively. Get an independent filmmaker who knows how to make some Star Trek in there. Now, if I was Mitch Watts, the first thing I would do is announce that Discovery, Picard, and Lower Decks are not part of the classic timeline. Me too. This is an alt timeline where the future Spock in Star Trek 2009 came from, thus separate Kurtzman Trek and the Kelvin film from the golden age of Star Trek. I think that by doing this, it would make a lot of fans that are unhappy with what has been done to Trek since 2009 happy. At the same time, this will not upset those fans of Kurtzman Trek, as the timeline has not been wiped out and is still there. It's just no longer connected to Roddenberry and Berman Trek. The next thing I would do is try and get Berman back as a consultant. I would not do that. After he did make 18 seasons of good Star Trek and on budget, something Kurtzman has not managed to do. I would get some of the greats behind-the-scenes people of Star Trek back. I would absolutely do that, even if it was only in a consultant role to help shape the look of the films and the shows. I would also go back after Brian Fuller, Manny Cotto, Ronald D. Moore, Ira Stephen Barron, Melinda Snodgrass, just to name some, who wrote some of the best episodes of Trek. I would use them to spitball ideas to where to take Trek, and even offer those that have showrunner experience the job of bringing Trek back. I would absolutely do that. Once I'd done that, I would look to continue Star Trek beyond Star Trek Nemesis and move the classic timeline forward. After all that is partly Trek is about moving forward, but at the same time staying true to what has come before. When this new show is doing well and making money, it would only be then that I would look to going back to the movies and possibly more spin-off shows. Hell, if they want to do an animation show, why not do a Deep Space Nine one? After all, we know we will never get a live action, but there's nothing to stop them from doing animation. What do you think, Rob, the PGS? Why not do a Deep Space Nine show? See, the thing is, they continued Deep Space Nine in the novels. Deep Space Nine even got blown up, and they rebuilt it, and it's cool. I mean, there's all of these things. All of these stories exist already. If you want to look into that, but they'll. I do think that going back and getting some Trek veterans to come back would be helpful. Maybe not Rick Berman, although Rick Berman as a consultant about how do you produce a TV series on time and on budget, he certainly knows how to do that. And they should have consulted him. I mean, they probably did, but they didn't listen. MK is here. MK, Captain Rob, whom, by the way, is always much more entertaining than Captain Ron, and that really goes without saying. Love Kurt Russell as much as anybody, but that movie, laugh out loud. Captain Rob, this is the PGS Enterprise 3000, if you will, of which we are all aboard. I would have made it the 2000 for our current day and millennia, but I like planning ahead. My top 10 desert island movies are Bronson, Rob Roy, and Barton Fink. Bronson, what a great role for Tom Hardy. The first three to remind me that life can be dark and hard and complicated at times, and therefore to always be grateful for better times as there had. Number 4, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Number 5, The World's End. And number 6, Wall-E. Side note, I think this one may have actually predicted the future. We'll see. This second set reminded me that fighting to save the world's civilization can have some levity at times, even when circumstances are dire. 7 through 9 are the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because really, what don't these movies have going for them? Number 10, Waking Ned Divine. All right. As a cap off to the list, because who doesn't want to live without a parting glass? I'm right there with you. That's my list, Captain Rob. Thanks, as always. Okay. Well, okay, thank you for those of you who are wondering. I've asked people to send in their desert island discs. If you're stuck on a desert island and you happen to have a great home theater system that washed up on the shore with you with solar-powered equipment, what are your 10 desert island discs? Hit me back or send them to Whining About the Movies, and we'll talk about them there. John Levasseur. Vasseur? What a cool name. Levasseur. This one, hi, Robert. Old fan here. Knew about you long before you got on YouTube with Schnepp. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So here's the deal. I don't make my face or support public. Wait a minute. So here's the deal. I don't make my face or support or my support public. When it comes to my fandom. It can be very toxic these days, as are most things. I was never one to cosplay or attend cons, short of my old Star Trek conventions way, way back in the day here in New York. However, I find it very interesting. You have stimulated me into doing something I never thought I would rise to a certain level of fandom to do. And what's that, you ask? Back in January, I pre-ordered the full-size Baby Yoda hot toy. Burnett, you son of a gun. I fell into your stinking singularity, passed through the event horizon of fandom, and bought a hot toy. Short of a t-shirt and the old ubiquitous Starfleet technical manual from back in the day, of which I have 2, I don't do merch. But damn it, Robert, I was watching your Hot Toy YouTube channel, I was watching your YouTube channel, and you started talking about the awesome Baby Yoda hot toy being made available. And while your episode was still playing through my computer speakers, I was tapping away, entering my credit card information to pre-order that cute little wonder with the big eyes, so accurately recreated in the wonderful detail you can always expect from a hot toy. What have you done to me? Dear God, what have you done? I've been impervious to spending money so frivolously, not beguiled by complicit marketing geniuses sensuously wriggling their fandom wares in my face. I have been strong. I have resisted. But you know what? I do know. Resistance is futile. Well, yeah, you do know that. About hot toys, that is. So, I'm still patiently awaiting for my little wide-eyed bundle to arrive with almost as much anticipation as Season 2. Robert, you are an evil man. An evil, evil man. To you and yours, be safe, be happy, and enjoy all there is. John Levasseur. Well, John, always nice to encounter an old friend. Let me tell you that you're going to be happy with that purchase. You know why? I'll tell you something. You know what people don't even know about hot toys? If you are so inclined, even when you open them up, like for instance, okay, like I didn't mean to order this. I thought I'd cancel this, but it like shows up. Now, when you open Hot Toys figures, what's so great about them is the smell. It's kind of like, you know, in the day, I don't know if you guys, laser discs. I've sealed all my laser discs in these great vinyl pouches, and even though some of them are 25 years old, they still have that like totally artificial, chemically, it's just, most people would think gross. It smells like industrial plastic. Yes, it does. And it's just wonderful. It's like wine. It's almost like the higher end the toy, the better the plastic smells. I know it seems strange, but it's true. Anybody who collects toys and action figures knows when you've got that collector-friendly, clear plastic, it's like going into an old bookstore and smelling the musty paper, which I love. I love that smell. As a true sensualist man, sometimes you follow your nose, and you're gonna have a good time. But I do I do expect that you must report back. I want you to give me the picture that new mothers always take with their babies, like, or you have to look like maybe you're still in pain, like, just give me that, give me that pose. I want to see it. I keep dropping my towel so I can wipe my brow, but everybody will expect to hear back, or better yet, send me a video, send me an unboxing video. Since it's your first hot toy, I want to see the delight on your face. That's what I like to see. Some people want to see other things on people's faces, but for me, I just like to see the delight. Send me a video of the delight on your face when you open up and pick up that hot toy, that 1-to-1 scale hot toy for the very first time. I want to see that. So does the Post-Geek Singularity. They want to see it too. James Wallace, our friend James Wallace, who I met on the street in Pasadena, who bought one of Elizabeth's prints. He's a good man, works in the industry. Good to have him here. Hey, Rob, it's been a while since I wrote a letter, and I was curious as to what you might think on what I'm going to bring up. Serialized versus episodic. Which benefits the characters better? The other day, I decided to pop in my old DVD of V, the 1983 miniseries. Bruh. Have you not bought the new Warner Archives beautiful Blu-rays of both V and V the Final Battle? Come on, James. I mean, dude. Anyway, I haven't seen this miniseries in 19 years. While watching, I noticed in one scene they show the engine room of the mothership, which was the Budweiser brewery. Now, for this miniseries, it makes sense due to, well, we don't know when we see it. That scene is where the visitors, the evil antagonists of this story, are going to store water from Earth, since their plan is to drain our natural resources and take them for their own planet. What other popular franchise used the Budweiser brewery for their engine room? I'll get to the connection a bit later. Let's think about that. Anyways, overall, V, the 1983 miniseries, holds up, even though it's a bit heavy-handed at times with the subject matter and it gets a bit goofy toward the end. Due to the miniseries being a ratings success for NBC, a sequel miniseries was commissioned, and V, the Final Battle was broadcast a year later. Now, the main difference is that the creator, Kenneth Johnson, was involved in the writing process at first, however, left the sequel miniseries over creative differences with the studio. Studio tampering. I bought the Blu-ray and watched it the other day. Okay, you're ahead of me. Oh, all right. I bought the Blu-ray and watched it the other day, and I hadn't seen the Final Battle in 24 years. With hindsight, you can see where the quality of the franchise started to diminish. NBC smelled the success ahead of time and commissioned a V series for the following fall season. This is where my question comes up. V was pretty good as a miniseries, yet as a series, it barreled downhill really fast. It did. By the way, I have all 18 issues of the DC Comics series of V. The character of Diana, portrayed by evil Jane Badler, who in the miniseries is threatening and evil, yet beautiful, and as a child of 5 of 6, I had conflicting emotions over her. I love her, yet she's so evil. This probably confused many young boys and probably contributed to their relationship issues years later. In the series, Diana became a camp character, almost a soap opera character. In fact, the whole series turned into something akin to a soap opera, which was a confused mess. Which brings me to Star Trek. The brewery is the engine room. You could look at this as a metaphor for JJ and his creative disciples. They became drunk with creative power and have handled their franchises like someone that is driving drunk on the 405 after spending too much time in their engine room sampling the product. Let's peel back the layers like the peeling of the skin of the visitors. As consumers of Star Trek, we are used to seeing our characters a certain way. Yes, portrayed earnestly. With TOS, the transition between the series and films was almost seamless. It worked for those characters. Yet when TNG transitioned into the films, probably due to the characters being portrayed as more of an ensemble, the films always felt like they were missing the characters of the show we loved due to focusing more on Picard and Data. TOS had a tremulative with Kirk, Spock, and Bones, and it wasn't really an ensemble show. The TNG films suffered as a result to be as successful as the TOS films. Same can be said of the JJ films. They tried to make those films and characters as an ensemble. When they brought back Picard for Star Trek Picard, they again went against the grain of the character we were used to seeing. They made Star Trek Picard basically a 10-hour film, and the ensemble was weak. As a character, Picard was interesting, but we're being force-fed more of him than our appetite has ever expected. On TNG, there were other characters to focus on and love. We didn't see and hang out with Picard all the time. The creators of Star Trek Picard counted on the love for Picard to draw viewers in, yet the creators of the show didn't seem to know what to do with him. Like the people that took over V when it became a series didn't understand what to do with the remaining characters from the miniseries, and as a result of the switched narrative format, the characters and the writing suffered just like Star Trek Picard. So, do you think that is something that really makes a difference? The format in which the character appears for the audience to soak in? Well, James, as always, I think this is a great question. I think the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. But there is a longer answer. By the way, Kenneth Johnson, who created the V miniseries, did write a V novel. And I thought it was actually pretty interesting. I have it. Where's Johnson? Do I have it? Can I reach it? No. I'd have to get up. It's too... With the Robservations in the state it's over there. I can't get to it. But it is a very interesting novel, and if you're a V fan, I would suggest reading it. I think it's called V, the Second Generation. But it's interesting because it takes place years later, and the visitors are still on Earth, which is and how society is dealing with all of that. But, you know, here's the thing. I think the real problem with the Next Generation movie series is they were looking for a movie idea as opposed to a Star Trek idea. Now, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, to me, was perfect because it's a sequel to a television series episode. And you have a great central villain, even though I believe obviously Star Trek should have antagonists. But Khan was sympathetic. Obviously, we knew Khan's backstory if you'd seen the show, and if you didn't, you'd still get it. But I think the problem with the transition of Star Trek from movies to television, or television to movies, is they've forgotten what the core values of Star Trek are. And if you look, there are ensemble movies that are terrific. But I think the problem is nobody ever looks to ensemble movies when they think about making... When Star Trek is transitioning, or any science fiction series, and there haven't been many that have done this well, but when Star Trek transitions to the big screen, there is the thought that, we need a big screen idea that big action adventure, big sweeping. I think that is wrong when it comes to Star Trek. I think what you should do is you go look at the great ensemble movies that have been made. Go back to World War II movies, like The Great Escape, like Bridge on the River Kwai, like The Dirty Dozen, team movies, or things like that. That's where you look. You don't need some big giant villain. What you need is a compelling narrative that is going to require all of the attributes of your crew, and give everybody a chance. And I'll tell you something, some of the classic Star Trek movies did that better than others. Like, I wasn't a big fan necessarily of Star Trek 3, but I thought the way they utilized a lot of the cast was interesting. Everybody had a moment to shine. Sulu, Uhura, Chekhov, and they obviously they still had to appeal to Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, but when they did incorporate the rest of the ensemble well, it worked. Star Trek 4 was delightful. We had delightful scenes with Scotty and Chekhov and Uhura, although that's what they said. Where are the nuclear vessels? They would know. They're not stupid. I hated that. But anyway, they just don't think that way. They're like, well, Star Trek is transitioning to the big screen. We have to make a big giant action adventure story. Well, why not do a big screen Measure of a Man? Why not look at A Few Good Men and go, let's make that a Star Trek movie? But nobody would think that way because there's there isn't that the creative out of the box thinking. Now people would be like, come on, Rob, would anybody go see a courtroom drama Star Trek movie? Hell yes, they would. If it was really well written and someone like Aaron Sorkin came up with a great plot, they would absolutely go watch that movie. But you need people that can think that way first. Now with V, The Final Battle, I mean, Kenneth Johnson, when he wrote V, it was definitely an allegory for the rise of fascism, National Socialism, whatever you want to call it, Nazis. It was space Nazis. And V, The Final Battle moved away from the allegorical nature and made it much more of an action adventure. And V, The Final Battle was all right. You know, you had a girl giving birth to alien babies and all of that. And great battles at the end, I guess. But when you get rid of the original, it's so easy in Hollywood. Well, we don't like that take. And they get rid of the original creators. I mean, it's push and pull. It happens all the time. It's a rough business. But I never think it goes that well. And I don't think V, The Final Battle, and of course V, the TV series, because, you know, when you've got a show that is based on an allegory of space Nazis coming to Earth, and what does that mean? What you should be looking towards is things that told the story of occupied France, occupied Paris. You know, tell a French resistance story, but in a science fiction context. This is the problem that I have with so many modern science fiction movies, is they don't go back. Like, for instance, you know, Star Wars should be going back and looking at Kurosawa more. Modern Star Wars. Now they're not doing that. I don't even think J.J. Abrams could talk about Kurosawa movies, because he certainly didn't inject any of it into The Force Awakens. I mean, go back and look at the things that Star Wars was originally based on. And there's so many people are not looking in the right places when they take on these franchise properties. And that's why I think they tank. You know, going to a brewery in V, The Final Battle, or in V made perfect sense because, like you said, they're storing water. So, okay, there's verisimilitude there. There are literally tanks that in these mile-long city starships or flying saucers that's what they're doing. They're sucking up water, so it makes sense. The engineering decks, I mean, that's another thing. Why would you possibly go on location to a brewery to shoot the thinking behind that? I understand, like, we want to give it some scope. We don't want to just be in a set. Well, the thing is, no, you should be in a set, because the Star Trek engine rooms have already been established. To go on location into this giant, like, you don't need to do that. That's what you would nix. As a producer of a Star Trek movie, I'm like, no, this is going to be stage bound. All the sets it's going to be stage bound. We have to believe that we're on a starship. We're not that turbo lifts are roller coasters and there's all this empty space. Nobody would build a spaceship with that much empty space. As soon as you go shoot in a brewery, you're like, wait a minute, this will never look like a starship because it makes no sense. Nobody would design. There is not going to be wasted space. I mean, even the corridors of the original series, the one thing that I think is wrong with the original series that bothers me is how wide the original corridors are. In Star Trek The Motion Picture, they alleviated that. They made the corridors smaller, look more realistic, look better on film. And they were angled. They weren't just straight. So, whatever. But yeah, they look, it's then you get just too many cooks, as we all know, if you've seen that. But yeah. Calvin Bowes, how are you doing, Calvin? Dear Rob, as a longtime Bond fan, I wanted to write about how important Roger Moore was to the James Bond films. Now, let me tell you that Roger Moore was not my favorite Bond. That honor goes to Sean, but I believe that if there was never a Live and Let Die, there would be no Time to Die, and let me show you why. The 1970s had the largest volume of kids in the 20th century because they were the baby boomers. After On Her Majesty's Secret Service, if Lazenby had continued, the Bond films would have stayed serious. A serious film would not have attracted younger people who were the majority of moviegoers. Even The Diamonds Are Forever was played for laughs. Connery was not right for that type of film. Enter Roger Moore. He had the charisma and humor that appealed to young people. I will admit, when I saw Live and Let Die, there were things that appealed to me that make me cringe today. For example, Roger was funny, and the movie was funny. I loved J.W. Pepper and got real excited when I saw he was coming back for Man with the Golden Gun. I truly believed he saved the franchise because the spy craze of the 60s was dead, and they had not went in this direction, that would be over. The films of the 70s were mostly aimed at kids, and that is why they would even do something as dumb as put 007 in space. What? That was awesome. Come on. But there was the genius. But there was the genius in '81. As most baby boomers are becoming adults, they make For Your Eyes Only a more mature film. So I know Bond, especially the franchise, it was needed. There's a lot of misspellings here, but we love to hate on Roger Moore. Well, Calvin, I want to say that I think there's a lot of truth in what you say. I think, look, a lot of the things you have to remember is that, James Bond is an agent of the government. He stands for governmental power and the fact that the government knows best. And I think that in our post-Vietnam era, post-civil rights, the sexual revolution, there was a lot of political upheaval. We had Watergate in the United States. I mean, Live and Let Die came out in 1973. So the idea that you were going to now send up that government power and make it more of a parody, I think you're probably right. And also remember, the Bond franchise was emulating other trends at the time. Live and Let Die was a blaxploitation movie. And, one day someone's going to tell me that term has actually been canceled. I use the term blaxploitation because up until this day, that is the term of those kinds of movies. Beginning really, I think, with Larry Cohen's Black Caesar. And I love blaxploitation movies. So that's what Live and Let Die was. Then Man with the Golden Gun followed up on the martial arts craze of films. The grindhouse martial arts movies that were playing in 42nd Street. Bruce Lee, definitely following on the heels of that. Spy Who Loved Me was a return. They made it more of an epic fantasy. But again, definitely appealed to kids. And it was pretty interesting that Spy Who Loved Me, I think another thing that helped Spy Who Loved Me, that cemented it, made it very successful, was it followed months later on the heels of Star Wars, which was a very good thing. So I think you're right. I think that's a very astute assessment of what Roger Moore meant to the franchise. I go back, I have a much harder time watching Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun now. I'll always love Moonraker because I saw it in the theater and I saw Spy Who Loved Me in the theater. Spy Who Loved Me was my first theatrical Bond. Moonraker was my second, and I wasn't as up on the tonal shifts as I am now. So I'll always have a place in my heart for Moonraker. Plus, I like that it's so globe-trotting, and there's some pretty audacious stuff in it that I really like. But For Your Eyes Only, definitely a return to form. Octopussy, people either love that or hate that. I kind of like it. Every time I watch it, I go back and forth, and A View to a Kill I hated. But for Roger Moore, for me, the three movies that I watch of his that are most palatable to me are Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, and For Your Eyes Only. I have a real hard time with... And both Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun seem so small. They didn't even shoot with the widescreen aspect format. They're I don't know if they're 166 or 185. I think they're 166. They go back to the format of the first three Bond films. Even that, it just seemed cheap. But, yeah. Dean Mikitich writes in again and says, "Hi, Rob, in the Post-Geek Singularity. Rob, I have just watched Part 2 and Part 3 of your Axonar feature film documentary pieces. What can I say except holy crap? This could have been the best Star Trek we have seen since Enterprise ended back in 2005. I love the final design that Tobias came up with for Starbase One, though I can't quite see it being consistently added onto to become the Mushroom Space Station that we got to know and love in Star Trek 3 and beyond, but it is a fantastic design that suits the era this film is set. The amount of detail he put into that is just stunning. Shame he is not on the sci-fi meshes these days, otherwise I would have asked him to post up some beauty shots and get a really good look at his detailed work. Those effect shots just looked gorgeous and makes me want to ditch work and crack open Blender and go back to work on my own project, building all the Enterprises from Trek. 3 done, 6 to go. I really like the Alexander Bornstein title theme, and the added Jerry Goldsmith's Klingon theme works so well. I had goosebumps just listening to it, and I had to re-listen to it again. Hearing your passion and excitement in these features really rubs off and gets me excited and makes me really want to see the finished product. Alas, I know that will never happen. Rob, when Prelude to Axonar came out, the fan community just went nuts over it. However, when the teaser trailer for Discovery came out, it was received with a lukewarm response. Though the teaser trailer had no live action in it, the effects were picked apart along with the design. It looked like a rush job to get it out for Comic-Con. It did at that. I think it was also around this time that it was announced that Brian Fuller had left Discovery and Alex Kurtzman was running the show. Given the lackluster teaser trailer and news of Kurtzman taking over, a lot of the fan base hope disappeared, but was willing to give Discovery a go. but saying that the fan base was looking forward more to Axanar than anything official coming out, do you think this contributed to Axanar being sued? Recently, you've put the first 4 features for Axanar on your channel, then shortly made it private. When asked about it, you said someone at CBS had asked to look at it, and it has nothing to do with the lawsuit. Not long ago, you had a live stream for the Unmade Khan miniseries that CBS copyright struck you on. You speculated that they would only do this if the miniseries was in some sort of production. Now we are hearing rumors of an internal civil war going on over at Star Trek. So, Rob, given the rumors, you being copyright struck and someone in CBS contacting you over your work with Axanar, reading between the lines, it looks to me like Emma Watson or someone else is doing a bit of prep for when Kurtzman is gone. I also suspect that someone, possibly working for Miss Watson, has seen your channel and your talks about Star Trek. They have listened to your criticism of current Trek and how you would fix it. Given everything I've just said, maybe they have binned the Star Trek spreadsheet that got Kurtzman the job and are now eyeing you up for a position in future Star Trek producing. After all, it's 2020 and some of the weirdest shit has gone down this year. I'm not going to say it's not a possibility of happening. Peace and long life. Dean M. P.S. If it's true and someone in Miss Watson's camp is eyeing you up for a position in Star Trek, I wish you the best of luck. Even if you are aware of it, I know something you would not be able to talk about for now. Okay. Dean, I love you. I love that anybody would think of me in this way. Now, here's the thing. Let me impart to all of you a Hollywood lesson. In Hollywood, the only way you get hired for certain jobs is other people have to be convinced that you can already do those jobs before you even know about it. I will tell you, I have not been contacted by anybody at Paramount or Emma Watts' office or anyone to do with Star Trek at all. I was contacted by somebody involved with CBS about the work I had done on Axanar. I was contacted in a creative capacity. For those of you who want to know what Dean is talking about, I had done... So many people know that I was involved with the Axanar fan film project. I did not know Alec Peters, who came up with the idea, and I had been friends with Christian Gossett, who directed Prelude to Axanar. Prelude to Axanar is currently available on YouTube now. Now, Prelude to Axanar was a crowd-funded short, Star Trek short. It was a proof of concept for what would eventually be a feature film detailing a period of time that had never been seen before, which was the first war between the Klingon Empire and the Federation, but it was derived more from FASA, which was the Star Trek role-playing game. There was a supplement about that war. Donatu, there was mentions made of skirmishes. Kirk said skirmishes, Donatu, the Battle of Donatu, and things like that. Now, it was a leap to say that there was this Klingon war because it was never mentioned as a war, only skirmishes. But we were going to tell the tale of the 4 Years' War, which was an outbreak of hostilities between the Klingon Empire and the Federation because of the Federation's expansion into territory that the Klingons had already claimed for their own. Klingons were spacefaring before the Federation was, before Earth was. And that's what happened. Now, the thinking behind Axanar was we wanted to make it very canonical and have a canonical fealty to all Star Trek that had come before because we were all raving Star Trek fans. Christian told Alec about me, and Christian and Alec took me to lunch, and they asked me, and at the time I was working on the Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Enterprise Blu-rays. Now, as a professional Star Trek fan, I worked as a Star Trek consultant in the mid-90s for Viacom. I worked on Star Trek The Experience, editing all of the videos that played in the Experience. I cut those videos. I made the feature film Free Enterprise, which is about Star Trek fans, and I directed William Shatner. And then I worked on all of the documentaries for Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Enterprise for the Blu-ray releases. None of any of the things that I have done professionally on Star Trek, or even in my career, As much as I've worked on DVDs and special features for Lord of the Rings, the X-Men movies, Chronicles of Narnia, and Superman, even though I've been embedded with productions and seen how $200 million movies are made from the beginning to the end, probably seen more of how a movie is made than anybody who's actually working on the films, because I've seen the entirety of them. Even though I've produced movies, I've been a producer on movies like Agent Cody Banks and The Hills Run Red, even though I recently finished producing Tango Shalom and edited the film, nothing in my professional career, unfortunately, would allow someone at the studio level to hire me to work on a franchise like Star Trek. Now, could I do the job? Yes. Could I do the job probably better than anybody else in Hollywood? Very probably, because I began my career in Hollywood working for Bill Young, the senior vice president of physical production at Warner Brothers, and all I did was run around Warner Brothers for 2 years watching how movies were made. So I have had an incredible career seeing how large budget studio movies are made. I have worked as a development executive. I have been a story analyst. I worked at both CAA and William Morris. I worked for Silver Pictures. Not for very long. But unfortunately, there has been nothing in my professional career that would make anybody at the studio level think that I should necessarily be hired for the job. Now, if someone met me and talked to me and maybe watched this show, that could be a possibility. But the reality is, it's not. Unless somebody were to look at, I guess, what we were doing for Axanar and hearing what I thought about it. Yeah, I mean, when I was doing Axanar, took over as the director. So for those of you who have never seen it, the short film Prelude to Axanar is available on the Axanar page. It's 20 minutes long. You can see what it is. It was a different take on Star Trek. It was a documentary. It was inspired by Band of Brothers and Facing Ali, and we were doing a documentary about a battle, that the 4 Years' War, and we thought that would be a novel way to do a Star Trek film, and it was always going to lead into the feature film. Christian left as the director of the feature film, and I was directing the Axanar feature, what I hoped to be the feature, for 3 years. So I was developing. We were going to make a big budget feature-length Star Trek film that we were going to try and make, and it would compete as a Star Trek movie for $2 million. And the thing that you can see, I actually directed the Vulcan scene that is also on the Axanar page. Now, I directed that, conceived of and directed that. We shot it in a parking lot with a 20-foot, a 20 by, so it was a 20-foot by 20-foot piece of green screen in a parking lot under natural lighting conditions by design, and we did that in an afternoon. Now, that was going to be reshot, but that was proof of concept to show that we could make a feature-quality film. So, yeah, I mean, I've worked on those kinds of Star Trek things, and I was given a lot of creative leeway when I was editing and post-supervising Prelude to Axanar. I got to bring a lot of ideas into it. But make no mistake, none of any of these things that I've done would allow anybody to believe, unfortunately, they're wrong, but it's just the way the world works. So I operate under no illusions that, I mean, I would absolutely, I could walk into a meeting and I could blow somebody away and I could get myself hired. The thing is, nobody's going to call me in for a meeting. Now, I don't exactly know why people wanted to look at those. I had those pieces on my website, but when some certain things happened to the website, those pieces were down, so I put them back up. I made 4 pieces. There's only 3 up, but I made 4 pieces, which is over an hour long. I made over an hour long documentary about what I was doing with the Axanar feature film. Now, we had never shot any live action, but what I was doing was I was directing the visual effects sequences that Tobias Richter was then making for 4.5 months. And what the idea was is that we would, once we had these visual effects sequences, when I was directing the live action, I could more dynamically integrate the live action stuff with our visual effects. So I would have I would do a visual effect shot, it would run long, and I would know, okay, I'm going to cut this visual effects shot up into 3 pieces and intercut it with the live action stuff. And I could have more dramatic camera angles because we would actually have the visual effects, the finished visual effects, on set. And then we could use that to inform how we shot the live action. So we could cut in and out and make the sequences more dynamic. And during that time, I had Alexander Bornstein write a piece of theme music for the feature so we could give it to our there's a company in the UK called Territory that was going to do our opening credits sequence, which was the way I wanted to do the opening credits was it would tell the entire story of the 4 Years' War up to the point that the acts in our feature film would take place. So I have those on my website, but unfortunately, because I am at odds with Alec Peters, who came up with all of that material, who's accused me of stealing. I mean, and it says I owe him money, which is absurd considering I worked for him and worked on this project and made him over $1 million with my work. I worked for him for 3 years, and he apparently says that he didn't pay me, like I was there on a voluntary basis, which is absurd. If you saw all the money I made for that guy, and he says I owe him money, and every time he says I owe him money, it goes up. I owed him money or steal things. I mean, I was in his office every single day for 3 years. So, and when we all moved out together, he wasn't asking me for anything. And the one thing he did ask me for was a matte painting that I had, and I gave it to him. It wasn't until I resigned from the project when he decided there's no chance to make the feature film that I'd been working on for basically 3 years, that he wanted to make two 15-minute movies that 3 years later he's still not making, and now he's suing his new director who has left. So, you know, remember, Prelude to Axanar, when you watch it, from the time they crowdfunded that to the time it premiered at the San Diego Comic-Con, and by the way, my executive Ken Ross from CBS came to that premiere screening at San Diego and loved it. 4.5 months. So, my friends, if you can't make a Star Trek fan film in and out in 4.5 months, that's of the quality of Prelude to Axanar, you have no business calling yourself a producer. If you're calling yourself a producer and you're talking about how to make 2 more 15-minute shorts years later when you made Prelude to Axanar in 4.5 months, you're not a producer. You're a failure. An utter failure. Anyway, that's a good letter. So there we go. I mean, hey, though, if anybody wants to call me, I'm available. Well, when I finish the Netflix series I'm currently working on. So there you go. Marius writes in. Marius says, Dear Robert, I stumbled upon your channel via Midnight's Edge, and I enjoy listening to your shows, although I cannot listen live because of the bloody time zones. I live in Germany, and please forgive my bad English. You live in Deutschland! Do you know Dieter Bastian? And do you know Patrick Keller? You should. They're making movies. And please forgive my bad English. It has been a while since I wrote a longer text in English, which is not my native language. Also, sorry for the length of this letter. A few weeks ago, you were talking about UFOs. Oh, I love this letter already. And you mentioned Occam's razor. As a trained physicist, I just have to make a few remarks on your interpretation of the footage you showed back then. William of Occam was an English friar who lived around the year 1300 AD. While the said principle goes back to Aristotle, Occam made it famous for its consequent application in his writings. As you might imagine, the times were very different, and Occam used this principle more or less to justify explanations along the line of God made everything. Which brings me to my first point. While Occam's razor says, and this is very simplistic, to prefer the most simple explanation, it does not mean the explanation is true. I could say, God made the beer bug and be done with the explaining, but obviously this explanation is not true. So in the case of UFOs, Occam's razor provides a simple explanation, and it might be true or not, which leads me to my second point. You have to take into account Karl Popper's theory of science, where he defines what a scientific theory is. Basically, a scientific theory must fulfill the following. A, it must be logically consistent, i.e. a theory cannot contradict itself. B, it must the falsifiable. This means you can prove a theory wrong or incomplete by one experimental counterexample. Note that, I don't know if that language, I don't know if I'm missing that, but note that a scientific theory cannot be proven. It can only be tested by examples. To prove a theory, you have to test all examples, which cannot be done. When you have enough positive examples, you tend to say that the theory is most likely correct within the tested conditions. A famous example is Newton's theory of motion versus Einstein's theory of special relativity. Einstein's theory of special relativity. Special relativity. Newton's theory is fine for daily uses, but it's wrong when it comes to high velocities. C. A scientific theory must be accessible to experiments. This means if there is no way to experimentally test something, then it is not science. Note that A and C currently exclude the examination of ghosts from science. There is no logic in their movement, and there is no way to test the properties of a ghost. However, it does not mean that ghosts do not exist. Or maybe some smart person finds a way to the properties of ghosts in the future. A theory must make testable predictions for experiments. Note that this excludes social sciences from being a science. If you apply A to D in a strict way, because the order to test social theories, you'd have to make experiments on society, and I don't want that. Whether you exclude social sciences from being a real science is up to every person. To conclude, using Occam's razor without Popper's theory of science or any other guideline makes this razor an uncontrolled weapon for destroying common sense, if I may say so. Alien UFOs might exist or not. And if a person believes in them, that's fine, but it doesn't make the alien UFOs necessarily real. By the way, I forgot to mention that you mean alien UFOs. A bird could be a UFO if you cannot make it out as a bird. I'd also like to bring the following into the picture. Suppose alien UFOs exist. What does it say about the reliability of the alien technology when they crash, like in 1947, like so many people believe? The UFO could have had a technical malfunction, which I doubt, when you can build objects capable of interstellar travel. The UFO could have been shot down by the UFA or encountered a space catastrophe. Since these UFOs are not accessible for experiments, it means the matter is not scientific and therefore a matter of personal belief. Another explanation could be that the Air Force have conducted experiments with special technology and perfected this technology over the last 70 years. In Gene Roddenberry's sense, I'd prefer this explanation because then we did it as the human race and not aliens. To use the Klingon logic in Star Trek VI at dinner, this is racist towards aliens. Maybe. Anyway, live long and prosper. All the best, Marius. What a great letter. That's why I love the Post-Geek Singularity. You just getting a letter from a German physicist about whether or not UFOs exist. Look, I tend to agree with Marius because remember, all of our science is all based on what we as human beings perceive in the world. And remember, while we have machines that can say, look at the various spectrums of light, we can't even see all of the various spectrums of light, yet they exist. So our way of thinking is very limited by how human beings experience the world. So when we think about the fact that an alien crash happened in Roswell in 1947, the idea that anything can even crash is based on our experience of the universe. Cars crash, planes crash, trains crash. So we can't even conceive of a universe in which machines are infallible because we haven't been able to build one that is. So the idea that a UFO or something, a machine from another dimension, another time, or another planet, that something that could be that advanced could be taken down by something we have or crash because of a lightning storm or whatever, is not allowing the possibility that anybody or any creature or any sentient life form that would have this kind of technology would probably be immune to these things for whatever reason. Their technology would be so in advance of ours that they wouldn't crash. They couldn't be shot down. But we can't conceive of that. We can't even conceive of the fact that, remember, a life form, there might be alien life studying us right now that is so alien that we have no way to perceive it. We wouldn't even recognize it as being alien life. I mean, we could only perceive things that we know or we understand in our limited experience of the universe. I mean, we have a hard time. If you really start delving in to the distance between stars and how big our universe really is, your understanding, I guarantee you'll have a hard time wrapping your head around the distances between things or how big some stars are compared to our own solar system. However, I do think when you start studying, let's call it cosmology, there's an actual, you can go one way and you can think to yourself, well, I'm utterly insignificant. It's like in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They're gonna throw you into the total perspective vortex, like they did to Zaphod Beeblebrox. The total perspective vortex was a torture device that you're put into it, and you're shown how insignificant you are in terms of the rest of the universe. How nothing you do, as a matter of fact, nothing that's ever happened on this planet, all of human endeavor, all of the art, all of the love we've had for one another, all the great pyramids, the Wall of China, all of the struggles means nothing. It is the blink of an eye in terms of the universal scale. Nothing that we've ever done will ever matter. That's what the total perspective vortex does to you. But you know what? Zaphod Beeblebrox went into the total perspective vortex, and you know what he came out thinking? That he's a really great guy. You know why? Because Zaphod Beeblebrox knows that he knows how big the universe is. He knows how infinite it is. And he knows, my friends, that there's only one Zaphod Beeblebrox, only him. Which means that for that moment in time, Zaphod Beeblebrox, as all sentient beings are, the rarest, most unique thing that exists in this universe. And perhaps, if we started thinking that way about each other, maybe we'd treat each other a little better. Like you want to have respect for your mom, grandparents. Well, shouldn't we have respect for each and every human being because we are the rarest commodity in the universe? Just a way of thinking, I guess. I've always kind of thought that way. Hence, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. You know why? Because every single person is unique. Every single person in the grand scheme of things, there's only one of them. The rarest thing in the universe is each one of us. When are we going to start treating ourselves that way? And each other? What a great letter. I want to thank you for sending that in. A physicist from Germany. Look at my German fans. They just don't let me down, I'm telling you. This next letter comes from Joey Koch. Who is Joey Koch, you might ask? Well, let me tell you, Joey Koch is one of the great unsung talents of the Post-Geek Singularity. He's actually sent me 2 pieces of music that I'm going to play on the 500 show. But he also sent me one of my favorite pieces of fan art anyone has done. And that's this. This he did for my birthday. Look at this piece of artwork. It's the cover. It's the box of an Aurora figure model kit. I mean, the artwork on this is great. The conception of it is great. I'm a huge fan of Joey Koch's work. The guy's amazing. And he wrote a letter. So here's his work. You can look at this work as I read it. Joey Koch writes, "Hey, Rob. It was cool hearing about your Dawn of the Dead experience as a 12-year-old. So young, and by yourself, that's pretty crazy. But you were probably a mature dude at 12. I was a few years older when I saw it in 81 at the age of 15, a Halloween triple feature of The Howling, Dawn of the Dead, and Phantasm in that order. By the way, The Howling you got great nudity with that, great werewolf nudity. That shotgun blast was so shocking. Pretty unforgettable moment even all these years later, which would seem to be a disturbing dilemma for a young mind. But I think there was a lot of gore appreciation going on with audiences in that era, and there were quite a few effects artists that were almost household names. Not to mention budding enthusiasts inspired by all the red, gooey goodness. I tried making guts once, too. I used to hang them from the tree on Halloween, stuff cotton balls in pantyhose, wrap with thin layers of dried latex sheets that were made on cookie sheets, brush on more layers of liquid latex, let it dry, and paint it red. There was a shop in San Francisco called Cryoland that sold all the supplies. Also, back probably 15 years ago, there was an internet forum that was called something like Low Budget Horror or something that offered great advice. I learned how to make good blood for movies that could go in the mouth. Caro syrup, red and green food coloring, and chunks of red jello. The green food coloring was the secret ingredient, though. Also an edible human liver. Yeesh. Same red and green jello combo, but mold it with sheets of nori seaweed. Edible, yes, but probably not too tasty. You'd have to ask my daughter about that. In 2006, I made a horror short called Dissolve. And there's a revenge murder scene that we shot in a cemetery, guerrilla style, in which the female antagonist is struck down with a piece of iron fencing. The first blow was to the neck, so I poured a shit ton of the Caro concoction because there was no wound to show, only blood. Well, all that blood eventually has to go somewhere, which in this case was down. So she spent the rest of the afternoon with panties full of corn syrup, including a 75-minute drive back home. She didn't complain that day, but later told me, needless to say, I made a note to myself. Anyway, I think I remember hearing something about Tom Savini having been deployed to Vietnam during the war. Yes, so he knew what damaged humans look like. That is true. And he even threw himself off the upper tier of a mall into some cardboard boxes below in Dawn of the Dead. Yes, he did. Pretty legendary. I'd really like to see the Argento cut with the Goblin soundtrack. I'm familiar with some of the Goblin material that was used for Dawn, though, and recently heard it used in an 80s Italian toxic chemical zombie flick, Hell of the Living Dead. I'm sure you know the theme. You're good with music. I do. Anyway, it's the staccato one. There was also a blue uniform SWAT unit in this movie. Well, Rob, for some weird reason, it brings me much joy to hear about your experiences. Stay good, Joey Coke. Well, Joey, thanks for that, and thanks for this artwork, by the way. What a great letter. I want to thank you for sending that letter in. Thank you very much. Well, now let's jump over and see what you guys have been sending me here. Willow sent me in a super chat yesterday that I did not read, obviously, because I didn't go on yesterday. So let me find where we are. And Willow, I don't know if you have a 4K disc or not, but I'm gonna put your name in. Putting your name in for this Flash Gordon 4K disc. So there you go from Arrow. Willow says, have you seen Kaige Chen's Farewell My Concubine? I think I got that wrong. Yes, I have. Hot, hot, hot. It's considered one of the best Chinese films, but ironically got banned and later censored in mainland China for having a homosexual main character and negatively depicting the Cultural Revolution. I know. I mean, isn't that, it's so weird. I just don't understand that. By the way, I want to point out, in the last episode of Robservations, I was talking about the Chinese Guide to Science Fiction Films, and I was saying they should give me the job. I have no desire. I think it was misconstrued. I have no desire to go work for China working on their science fiction movies. I would get executed. They would take me away. They would throw me into whatever their gulag is, because the Chinese... the communist system, although there were science fiction movies made under the communist system in the Soviet Union and in Eastern Bloc countries, but the Chinese would quickly find that they're not really interested in science fiction as a genre. They're really interested in technology. And they have equated science fiction only to technology, not understanding all of the great science fiction are really themes. They're dealing with human truths in them. Of course, they're wrapped in the cloak of technology and the future and aliens and all that, but really the great science fiction is always an exploration into the human soul, the human spirit, the human heart. And ultimately, they would find themselves in diametric opposition to what science fiction is. So I was kind of being tongue-in-cheek. I think the idea of China making forward-thinking technological films that touch on science fiction is a good thing. But I think ideologically, the great science fiction movies would ultimately come into direct conflict with their government, their aspirations, and what they believe. So I would never take that job. I would be doomed to failure, but I was certainly having a fun time riffing on it. Willow also goes on to say, as someone else mentioned in the chat the other day, China can probably make a movie about the Borg, where they are the idealized utopian society. Laugh out loud. Well, Willow, you are correct. That is exactly true. Calvin sends in a tip and says, Braxton asked in the Relics episode of The Next Generation, why did Scotty want to be on the bridge of the Enterprise instead of engineering, the place he was happiest? Wouldn't he ask to see engineering again? That's a really good question. As people know, in the episode Relics, the 6th season Next Generation episode Relics, James Doohan comes back, and they rescue... He's on a ship, the Jenolan, that has crashed onto a Dyson sphere, And with no hope of escape, he put himself into the transporter for 75 years, and he's able to be rematerialized by the Enterprise crew. And in it, he's lamenting the fact that everybody he knows is long since gone, except Spock. He goes to see the Enterprise bridge. And Braxton, I guess, is asking, well, why didn't they recreate the engineering section? Because Scotty would want to be there. Well, Braxton, you're a very smart kid. You're my favorite Star Trek kid that I know, even though I don't really know you. That's a really astute question to ask. But I think that they needed to build something that was much more iconic for everybody, for the rest of the audience to see. While thematically, I agree with you, Braxton. But the bridge, and by the way, they only built one little wedge of the bridge. So they only built a little bit of the bridge. All of this was empty space. And to build the engine room, the iconic engine room, they would have needed to build a much bigger set. And they wouldn't have been allowed to. They wouldn't have had the time or money to do that. So they instead picked a bridge wedge, which was much more iconic for the rest of the audience. And since Scotty has a great conversation with Picard, it's sort of, and I think Star Trek, more people, we know Scotty worked in engineering, but the bridge of the Starship Enterprise is much more iconic. But what a great question, sir. Thank you for asking, Braxton. I very much appreciate that. You're a good kid. David Goldstein sends in a super chat and says, does this mean a new Batfleck hot toy? I would imagine so. I mean, they never miss a chance to make a Batman toy. I can't wait. I've got a Batfleck toy, and I've never even cracked it open. I need to free the toys. Dom Cobb from Limbo 2020 sends in a tip and says, Rob, in case these things seem a little strange, I would remind you that dreams feel real while we're in them. It's only when we wake up that we realize something was actually strange. Well, Dom Cobb was obviously Leonardo DiCaprio's protagonist in Inception, and he would know. So, Dom, I think you're absolutely right. I just, reality's it's pretty wacky out here today. It's bizarre. Richard Karate sends in a very generous super chat, sir. Thank you very much for that. What did you think of Lois and Clark and the Adventures of Superman? I love Dean Cain as Superman, and he's my favorite. Do you think we could get Cavill or Brandon Routh and Dean Cain all pop up as Supes in the Flash movie? Well, you know what I have to say. I did like Lois and Clark. I thought it was fun. I liked Dean Cain as Superman, and I liked Terry Hatcher as Lois Lane. I liked what that show was trying to do. I think it succeeded well, and it was certainly fun to watch. I enjoyed it. I think getting see, the thing is, Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton, there's some gravitas there. And I'm not saying that Henry Cavill and Brandon Routh and Dean Cain wouldn't be gravitas, but I think it would border on, I think they got to keep these crossovers a little, well, you know what? I'm talking out of my ass. If it's done well, it could work. I mean, I do like the fact of keeping the Michael Keaton, Ben Affleck thing special. But why not? Just go do a whole Crisis on Infinite Earths thing, but then it gets a little ridiculous. It all comes down to the characters and the story. If the script was good, I would say yes. Richard Karate, you were very generous today, sir. I am a massive Star Trek fan, but I think Riker would have been a better captain than all of them, even Picard. It was Riker who led the fleet at Wolf 359, defeated the Borg, and saved Picard, and he doesn't get credit. You know what? I think Riker was great. I think it would have been very interesting. They were when they did Second Chances and they had Mirror Riker, not Mirror Riker, but the transporter duplicate of Riker, they were thinking about killing Jonathan Frakes off. And they decided not to. But it would have been interesting. I mean, Riker definitely deserved his command. And by the way, one of my favorite series of Star Trek novels are the Titan novels, that Riker does have his own command of the Titan. It's really, really good. Jeff Yerkley sent in a super chat and says, count me in. Well, Jeff, by the way, thanks for the information you gave me. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for that insight. James Everett, that's personal and confidential to Jeff Yerkley. Pardon me, not Yerk Lee. There's no L in his name. It's Yerky, Jeff Yerky. The James Eversole Jr. Movie Podcast sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, what are your thoughts on the stop-motion Pinocchio by Guillermo del Toro? I'm stupid excited. I can't wait to see it in 2036. Anything that Guillermo del Toro does, I will watch. Even when I don't like it as much, like Crimson Peak, it's certainly worth watching. I'm a big Guillermo del Toro fan, all the way back to Kronos. I mean, heck, funny story. If you go back and you look at the DVD that Lionsgate put out in the early aughts, That's actually my wife on the cover. My ex-wife was on the cover of that. She used to design packaging for Kronos. They didn't have any of the key art, so she designed that, and she put herself in the key art. But that's not why I like Guillermo del Toro. I like Kronos from the first time I saw it. Anonymous sends in a tip for $6.90, but Anonymous, I can't. Well, maybe it's got your address or whatever, Anonymous. I can still contact you for the Flash Gordon if you win it. Pardon me. It's not a win. It's a random giveaway as appreciation. Jamie Cruz says, "Wow, Rob, those never to be made Axonar videos were so great. Way to go." Well, Jamie, thank you. I mean, I would make them publicly available, but Alec Peters always gives me copyright strikes. But they have been on my website for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now. But he doesn't have copyright over them, and it's my work. So, yeah, and there you go. And according to him, I owe him a bunch of money. Like I worked for him for 3 years, but apparently he didn't pay me anything. He just loaned me money that I now owe him back. But gosh, yeah. Mark Evans says, "Just a tip to say hi to you and the gang in the chat. Has nothing to do with wanting that 4K for my starting physical media collection. Nothing at all. Speaking of which, I have in my hand Apocalypse Now, which I've never seen. Can't wait to watch it." Well, Mark, I hope you have the 4K release of Apocalypse Now with all 3 versions. And if in fact you do have all 3 versions, might I suggest you watch the final cut. I know people are going to be like, "Wow, Rob, that." No, but I think that the final cut, if you've never seen Apocalypse Now before, I mean, I would say the theatrical is still my favorite, but there's stuff in the final cut that I wish was in the theatrical. And I think the final cut, if you've never seen Apocalypse Now, watch the final cut. It's one of my favorite movies. Johnny Stewart, my old pal Johnny Stewart, sends in a tip and says, "So excited for the Batman Flash news. Super rad. What are your thoughts on director Andy Muschietti and how his style may translate to it? And here's $3.33 for a mini spritzer fan." Thanks. I do need a mini spritzer fan. I haven't needed one before now. I have one, actually. It's a little better now. It's cooled off a little bit. But thank you for that. I think Andy Muschietti is concentrated on horror more. I mean, I'd like to see more of a gothic element brought back to this. But I think, great directors can work in any genre. So I'm excited. I can't wait. I think it's going to be good. I think he's going to do a good job. I think he's committed. I think he wants to branch out. This is his chance to show people he can do some real action and to make an epic fantasy film. It's going to show his range. I think it'd be great. Mark C. sends in a tip and says, "Happy to see Affleck back. Despite my disdain for Snyder's 2 offerings, don't worry, it's going to be 3 soon. I look forward to see if it all comes together, and thought what he did right was casting the trinity of Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman." Absolutely. He really did a great job. People forget he cast Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and Affleck, which, remember, lest we forget, nobody believed he could do it, but he did it. Now look at how people are over the moon seeing Affleck or Batfleck come back. Amazing. Edgar Lighton sends in a super chat and says, "Hello, my good sir. Hope you are doing as always well. Keep up the great work. Thumbs up. Had a question. What Metacom Rocketeer version is that? Thanks. Be safe." Well, that's a good question. So, Metacom has the Real Action Heroes collection. Now, they're not nearly as detailed. They're more anime style. When they do movie figures, they're more anime style. But they did this Rocketeer figure, and this is the very first one that they released. The helmet doesn't come off, but it because there's no face, so it doesn't look anime-esque. It's great. I love this figure, but it's the problem with these real action figures is they don't last very long. The plastic is notoriously brittle. I mean, I think this figure has got to be close to 15 years old. Close, it must be. Sorry, it's like being all dainty. I mean, I love it. I'll give you an example. So here is their version of River Phoenix. Oh, the cross of Coronado is out of his hand. This is their version of River Phoenix from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That's their young Indiana Jones, and you can see the face is more of an anime-style face. So they're not looking to make... I should put that closer up. They're not looking to make... I don't know why he's got... why his his scar is black. I don't know, but so that's what the real action heroes are like. And if that's your thing, some people like I have a lot of Metacom. They do a lot of Marvel characters that are sort of halfway between, not even halfway between Hot Toys, but they're more like Mego figures, but they're a little better. But the problem is they made an incredible Spawn figure too, but they don't last. And if you touch them practically, the joints break. It's not good. So there you go, Edgar. But I still like this. I think it's a great figure. They've done a couple more over the years, but that was the first one that they put out. Someone from the future says, I've seen your top 10 movies on Twitter before, and I'm interested in why Inception isn't included. And is it fair to say Chris Nolan is the best writer-director currently working? Don't think Warner Brothers would give Steven Spielberg $225 million for an original concept. Listen, my top 10 movies are of all time are Christopher Nolan's movies is not in that top 10. I think Christopher Nolan I think his movies are handsomely made. I think they're beautiful to look at, and I really like watching them. But I don't think they hold up. They don't penetrate my soul the way a good Martin Scorsese movie does. And I think that if you watch, say, Goodfellas or the first hour of Casino, the visual, the cinema, the actual language of cinema being used is far beyond anything Christopher Nolan could give us. But not to say Christopher Nolan's an incredible visionary in his own right. But look, as much as I really do like The Dark Knight Rises, there's so much in it that doesn't make a lick of sense. Like I'll give you an example. I'll watch The Dark Knight Rises, right? The first half an hour is relatively after the opening action sequence, which is spectacular. The idea that Bane would go into the stock exchange in Gotham and somehow drain Bruce Wayne's fortune, and then Bruce Wayne's power is turned off, is just absurd. It's just absurd. The wealthy don't have all of their money in stock. Even if you could drain someone's bank account, it didn't make any sense. And then you're supposed to believe that, well, Bruce Wayne's broke and they turned his power off. Hell, I'm the master at knowing how long you can keep calling the utility company to keep your power on longer. Bruce Wayne couldn't ask for an extension? So there's a lot of stuff in Christopher Nolan movies that prevent him from being... I love The Dark Knight. But I think that the end of the film, with the testing the people of Gotham with the bomb on the ferries, I think that is something that isn't necessarily connected very much to the rest of the plot. And I would like to have seen something. I understand it. It is, but as far as the story that we've been told, it sort of is a little distant from that. And so I don't think. I love Inception. I love Christopher Nolan. But I love Christopher Nolan almost as a genre filmmaker. Certainly, he is the Tiffany standard when it comes to genre movies. But when I think about my favorite genre directors, like John Carpenter, for instance, I love his movies. The Fog, Halloween, Escape from New York, Starman, Prince of Darkness, They Live, Big Trouble in Little China, In the Mouth of Madness. I love all those movies. But I would consider them to be genre films. The only movie I think that John Carpenter came close, The Thing, I didn't mention The Thing. I think The Thing, even though The Thing is pretty genre, but The Thing, I would say that Starman is the closest John Carpenter came to breaking out of being just a genre film and making a film that has genre elements that transcends what he was doing. Now, I love genre filmmakers. I do. David Cronenberg I consider to be a genre filmmaker. He's broken out, sure. But like Dead Ringers, great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the culmination of his genre filmmaking. Christopher Nolan he makes basically glorified B movies. And I say that with all love and respect. But I don't think Christopher Nolan has yet made a film. Inception is incredible. But I don't think it's going to affect people the way a movie like Goodfellas will. Genre people love Inception. But if I showed Inception to my mom, he's a genre filmmaker. He's the Tiffany standard in genre filmmaking, but that's why I love his movies, because we don't have very many genre filmmakers left. Christopher Nolan, from Following sort of a thriller. Memento is also a thriller crime movie, but it's also a great twist, a genre movie. Insomnia, all of his films, I would say, are genre films. Now, people could disagree, but I don't think Christopher Nolan has made a timeless movie yet that transcends his genre roots. And this, by the way, when I say genre filmmaker, I don't mean to denigrate him, but I still await. Now, people could say that maybe Interstellar could, but I still don't think so. There's too much goofiness in Interstellar, and I think the end is very tacked on. But yeah, that's not to say I don't love him. Dieter from Deutschland. Shiny. Dieter is here. He sends in a tip and says, "Greetings, Rob. 1 week to go until Tenet. Besides the 3 tickets I bought, at the moment, no other ticket was sold for that English showing. Oh my God. I can totally live with that. No need to put me in the Flash Gordon winning pool. The Studio Canal set arrived." Well, Dieter, how pretty. How much do you love this Studio Canal Flash Gordon set? That is amazing. It's sold out. That's not to say that this 4K set isn't great, but, you know. Anyway, and this does have lots of special features on it still, so you get all the special features. I'm so jelly that you're going to go see Tenet. I really am. Darth Poncho says, "There is only one race, the human race." Yes, sir. That is my position. But I try and be inclusive. But yes, there is only one race, the human race. And every member of that human race, remember, is the rarest commodity in the universe. When are we going to treat each other that way? So there you go. Nick Parrish says, "Rob, so maybe you should retire your setting about how you have one foot in the grave. I only say this, Rob, because you never know. You might make it to be 110 or 112. Not the way I eat and drink. You might be Yoda. I'm not. Maybe I'll encounter the Mr. Jangles on the Green Mile or something. I'm not saying that is likely. I'm just saying, Rob, you never know. You are right, Nick. You are right. I do never know. But the important thing is not to fear death. It is a normal part of life, and I don't. But you know what? If I die in the next year, I'm going to be pissed. If I don't get to see all the movies, I'm going to be pissed. Somebody's going to hear from me. I'll still do Robservations from the afterlife. Wouldn't that be great? Robservations Season 3 from the afterlife. Today, I'm interviewing George Cukor about his filmmaking career. After that, Greta Garbo and Jimi Hendrix to talk about guitar playing. That would be fun. There's an idea for a movie. An afterlife, a talk show host. It's the Fisher King, but in the afterlife. And Jeff Bridges is a talk show host that gets to interview all of these celebrities and finds himself in an existential crisis and needs to go on a walkabout to hell to find out what life's all about. Eternal life. I don't know. Just something I came up with on the fly. Maybe it's not so good. Calvin Bose is here. Interesting to note is the Star Trek film most loved by Star Trek and non-Star Trek fans is Star Trek 4, and it's the smallest film in scope. I agree with you. How on earth can they save the future? One of the great ad lines of all time. You know, Star Trek 4 is easy to understand for even the uninitiated. And my mom loves Star Trek 4 because it's easy to understand. There are no more whales on the Earth. We have to go back in time to get the whales and bring them forward. It's got a great science fiction premise that's very simple and easy to understand. Jonathan Fong sends in a tip and says, "Hey, Rob, what do you think about the state and future of the Stargate franchise? As a longtime fan of the movie Stargate 1 at Atlantis, I'm interested in its possible revival, and I heard some news of Brad Wright trying to bring it back." As everyone knows, and Jonathan, if you're new to the channel or if you've been here a long time, I don't want to burst your bubble. The only Stargate I've ever seen is the movie. It is a big blind spot in my genre life, and I apologize. But I would say with the revivals that are happening, anything is possible. People, I know from this show, people love Stargate. People love Stargate. Stargate and Red Dwarf. But Stargate, they need to bring Stargate back. They bring Red Dwarf back. Why can't they bring Stargate back? I think somebody will. In our streaming world, when people are going to want, you have a show like Stargate, reviving Stargate for a streaming service is perfect. Absolutely. Ross Gecko sends in a super chat and says, "What's your take on Patrick Stewart loving Picard and supposedly being responsible for encouraging the big changes to his character and show tone?" Well, because an actor wants to do something different. Captain Picard, I mean, Patrick Stewart, 178 episodes of Next Generation and 4 feature films. It's not exactly Patrick Picard Patrick Picard. Patrick Stewart didn't exactly exhibit a lot of character growth. Yes, he got to do excellent episodes like Chain of Command Part 2 or The Inner Light, or he got to he got to get his comedy side on in Captain's Holiday, for instance. But Patrick Stewart wanted a role like he got to play Xavier in Logan. Xavier, the leader, the stoic leader of the X-Men, now plays a man not in control of his faculties, who's deteriorating and gets to die. All actors want to do something new and unique and interesting. And actors are the people that least understand the relationship an audience has with a beloved property. William Shatner, and I love Bill, even though, yes, he's blocked me on Twitter, which I do not know why. I don't know if it had something to do with Axnar or whatever. Last time we went back and forth on Twitter, it was about Logan's Run. I don't know if the people that run his social media realize that he and I did Free Enterprise together. I don't know. But I love William Shatner. But even William Shatner, even today, while he's written books about it and he's come to grips with it, he understands it from an intellectual standpoint, but he doesn't really understand it. He doesn't understand, because William Shatner is a guy that lives his life. You know, he goes out and lives. He'll dive with sharks in cages. He'll go ride horses. William Shatner's a man that does not sit in front of the TV. He'll watch sports, but he isn't going to sit in front of the TV and get caught up in. I mean, he might, but that's not his thing. So I don't think he ever really understood why did Star Trek, which was, remember, a failed gig for him. It was never a #1 show. It was always on the bubble. They were going to cancel it after the second season. It got to a third season, and then it's had this weird life of its own. And yet for him, it's always been something that's sort of beleaguered. But so these actors, they'll never understand the appeal. Remember, actors work on their projects less than anyone, certainly less than the crew, and far less than the writers, the directors, the producers, the editors, the visual effects people. They come, they do their jobs, and they go. And while they're doing their job, that's what they want to do. They want to play something interesting. For the day they're working on a show, they're like, I get to cry, or I get to put on a wacky French accent, even though my character is French. So the fact that he's coming back at all and he's getting paid, I mean, he's paid, remember, to talk positively about the show. And I'm sure he had a great time. But, and you know, he is not thinking about canonical Star Trek. You know, he's thinking about how can we make this story relevant to today. And he gets to do all those things, and he gets a voice, and he gets to add in. None of that translates to us as the audience. None of it. It doesn't mean that any of it's going to be any good or that we're going to buy any of it. So, of course he loved Picard. What actor wouldn't love Picard? I think the only time recently that I've ever seen actors speak with thinly veiled disdain about their shows, watch any of the actors talking about Game of Thrones Season 8. Lena Headey, if you're Lena Headey, I can't imagine. You've given your all as an actress. You've been shamed on the streets of King's Landing. That last season, that's your story arc. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. They're the only actors I've ever seen who openly talk with their new projects, their latest projects, with disdain. So, yeah. Julius is here. Julius Goodwin is here. Julius says, sorry for the low profile recently. Julius, low profile? Come on, man. You mean on the show? Certainly not with me personally. Been a rough week work-wise, but thanks for getting back to me quickly about the club membership issue. We'll both be reaping the rewards soon. God love you, Julius. You're a good man. You're a scholar and a gentleman. Cardinal Sin sends in a super chat and says, Rob, check the letters on your website. You demand. Oh, I've got more letters on my website. Actually, it's a message to be read by you off the air. Yes, I have a lot of messages I have to read. I do have one letter I'm going to end with, though, too, today. Brendan Sheehy sends in a super chat and says, your thoughts on Hugo Weaving's performance in V for Vendetta? I think it's amazing and didn't get the critical acclaim it deserved at the time. I love V for Vendetta. I think it's probably the best cinematic adaptation of Alan Moore's work. Love it, love it, love it. I think it's fantastic. Star Trek fanboy sent in, and you know what? I think it's because he was wearing a mask. You know, he was wearing a mask the whole time, so it's tough, you know. Star Trek fanboy sends in a super chat and says, hi, Rob. This is my first super chat for you. I just wanted to say you have the best live shows. Well, thank you, sci-fi Star Trek fanboy. I appreciate that very much. Do you know where I could go to learn more on how to model 3D Star Trek ships? Ooh, well, there are many, many, many Star Trek modeling fan groups all over the internet. There's places you can get people swap meshes of models, and there's all kinds of things. I mean, I would just start searching Star Trek 3D modelers on the web, and you'll have to dig in. There's so many. I mean, I know a few. I think Tobias Richter is probably the best, my first and foremost, my favorite of the fan modelers. I mean, obviously he does work professionally on Star Trek stuff like the calendars and things like that. But yes. So that's where I would check and report back. And by the way, welcome to the channel. Thank you for the super chat. And if you want to check it out, go look at Prelude to Axanar for some of Tobias's outstanding work with his models. And again, one of the things about once Star Trek '09, as much as I hate that film, the Kelvin is canonical. And even the designs of the starships in Star Trek '09, we adapted those designs because why wouldn't we? I like that. And it's interesting. Can you imagine if the Enterprise in Star Trek '09 was more redolent of real Star Trek designs? I think it would be good. But it's not. Anthony Gonzalez sends in a tip and says, Anthony, he says, I'm just now realizing the guy from Devo scored Thor Ragnarok. Goddamn brilliant. How'd you not know that? That's one of the great things. That's one of the great things about Thor Ragnarok. It's such a great score. I love the score for Thor Ragnarok. It's really good. Mark Mothersbaugh. He's a great film composer, by the way. TV Ops sends in a tip and says, who is the best James Bond? George Lazenby or Timothy Dalton? Okay. There's no contest. Timothy Dalton was obviously a real thespian, classically trained. He's just a much better actor. I loved George Lazenby in the role. I love the way he looked. He looked rugged, rough and tumble. But even when the whole scene with Sir Hilary Bray is all dubbed. But it's not really fair because Lazenby was a model and had no acting experience. But I think as Bond, Timothy Dalton was better, just because he's a much better actor. Claudius sends in a tip and says, newsflash from the White House capital of planet Houston, Ursa. Christopher Nolan does not belong in your top 10. His filmography should be your top 10. General Zod. Rob, why do you say these things about Nolan when you know that I will kill you for it? Very funny. Very funny. Someone from the future sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, I didn't mean to type too forward of a question earlier regarding Inception. I have OCD, and obsessing over Inception is the best way I can find to stop thinking about Tenet. I wish I could pull you with The Empire Strikes Back to read the story. Well, listen, I too want to see Tenet. I love Christopher Nolan's movies. I saw Inception 8 times in the theater. 8 times. I love Inception. We recently watched it for Whining About Movies, and I loved it. Loved it. Let's see. Let me see. Now I'm going to go back into the old letters, and we have a letter from our chairman. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Jeffrey Mao in the house with a letter. Dear Rob and all the observers of the Post-Geek Singularity, once again, it is I, the chairman, bringing you... Oh, I wanted to hear this one. Once again, it is I, the chairman, bringing you a review of the Warner Archive Blu-ray edition of 1987's The Hidden, directed by Jack Shoulder and starring Michael Nouri and Kyle MacLachlan. Shoulder had previously directed Nightmare on Elm Street 2 for New Line before The Hidden. He would go on to direct mainly TV movies and series, notably By Dawn's Early Light, which was a favorite of mine, about a hypothetical accidental nuclear war between the U.S. and the USSR. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat, I'm a huge fan of The Hidden. I think The Hidden, to me, is the perfect example of how to do a low-budget action sci-fi film. You know, it's not as good as The Terminator, but along of that ilk. Terminator was 84, Hidden was 87. I just adored The Hidden for what it was. Again, what they set out to make and what they eventually made, I think they really nailed it. But our chairman might not feel the same way. I've not read this letter yet. As you've mentioned before, Rob, The Hidden is a classic, relatively underappreciated gem among mid-80s B movies. The subject matter blends several genres: the conventional buddy cop investigation film, science fiction, and body horror. Despite everything in the film pointing towards it becoming a schlocky mess, much like the rest of the fare from the time, several elements in this film make it rise above that level and establish it as a classic of the genre. Well, here's to you, Jeffrey. You and I clearly park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. The first would be the premise and the execution. It's really quite straightforward and simple, and the film does well to stay on course and not deviate. A malevolent alien comes to Earth and is able to inhabit the bodies of its hosts like a parasite. It moves to another host when the current one is near death, and this happens often as the alien likes guns, heavy metal, Ferraris, and committing robberies. It also looks like his motive is to move up the ranks and try and inhabit the body of a leader, perhaps to facilitate an invasion by his species. You know, that's never stated in the film, but it's definitely implied, because he wants to be president of the United States. Or he's just the audience. One of the great things about the audience is if you're a stoned teenager that likes metal, Ferraris, girls with big boobs, and you want to be president, you are the audience for The Hidden. So I thought that was a really interesting how the movie is reflexive towards its audience. In pursuit of him is another alien, also hidden in a human body, in this case Kyle MacLachlan's character, FBI agent Lloyd Gallagher. Gallagher teams up with Nuri's LAPD detective Tom Beck to chase down the alien bad guy. The tension is relentless as the alien moves from body to body, and it keeps escaping the grasp of Gallagher and Beck. It seems impervious to bullets and doesn't stop until its host body is extremely injured. In some ways, it resembles the Terminator, which I'm sure the film draws inspiration from. The bad guy's true nature is hidden. It's nearly unstoppable and speaks in short, monotone sentences if it speaks at all. Gallagher is similar to Reese, a bit of fish out of water, but also completely focused on pursuing his alien quarry, but also having to hide his true nature. This makes it hard to gain the trust of the skeptical Beck, but more and more of the bad alien's nature is revealed. Beck comes to value Gallagher, and they establish an unlikely partnership. Lloyd contrasts even more with the evil bad alien in that he sees the goodness in Beck, that he's a loving family man who just wants to do his job and go home at night. Perhaps looking to replace the family that he himself lost while pursuing the alien, Lloyd chooses to inhabit Beck's body after Beck has been critically shot by the bad alien. Lloyd's job is done, and the bad alien has been killed, and he can give back to Beck by allowing him to continue living with his wife and daughter. It's quite appropriate in that while the bad alien was a pure parasite, only using its host body for its own gain, the new Beck-like Lloyd is a true symbiote, each benefiting each other. Lloyd gives Beck back life so that his family won't lose him, and Beck allows Lloyd to gain a family as well, a sense of normalcy and a home. Credit, of course, has to be given to the acting of the leads. Veteran character actor Michael Nuri, off Flashdance, plays the straight man well, increasingly exasperated at the number of bodies he's acquiring and also at Gallagher's evasiveness in answering his questions. MacLachlan captures just the right amount of awkwardness and naivete with Lloyd. He almost drops his cover while having dinner at Beck's house, but thankfully the scene isn't played for too many laughs, although clearly Lloyd or his species can't handle alcohol. Given how he plays Lloyd in a different world, I could imagine MacLachlan playing Data. However, he did go on to play another FBI agent, and probably his most well-known role in Twin Peaks. Well, Rob, those are my thoughts on The Hidden. It was nice to revisit after what must have been at least a couple of decades after the last time I saw this film, probably on VHS. I think I'm done with Warner Archive, as the other films I got, Innocent Blood and Body Snatchers, don't seem worth it for me to write a review. I have several other movies on order that I want to get into more, and I'm watching Scream Factory's Blu-ray of The Vampire Lovers right now, which I have seen before. I also finally got Vampiros Lesbos, so maybe I'll write a double review on those too. That would be a good double review. Flash Gordon should be coming today, and I have the Hitchcock 4K set on order for September, and Ford v Ferrari 4K, and a couple of Arrow Blu-rays from Zavvi, so looking forward to them. Thanks, Jeff. Well, Jeff, I'm glad you liked The Hidden. I like The Hidden. Everybody should watch The Hidden. It's a lot of fun, especially if you have not seen it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thus brings an end to Robservations episode number 493. For everybody who generously supported the channel via tips and super chats, I will be doing, we have this software where you punch in everybody's name and it randomly generates who wins. I will announce tomorrow who gets this Flash Gordon 4K disc. He'll save every one of us. So thank you for that. I also want to thank my moderating staff. Beginning with the great Mike Bodden. Of course, Greg Smith. And today we have Mr. Derringer, Haynock. The Richard is here too. I think that's everybody. Robert Pariso. I don't know if anybody else is here. I think not. But guys, I want to thank you. Oh, Robert Pariso is here. Thank you all so much. And of course, The Richard, the great The Richard, is running Zoom watch parties all the time. Tomorrow night, we have our first guest one half of the official couple of Robservations and the Burnettwork, Claude and Claudius, or as you know him, he has many different names here, but Claude and his lovely wife Candida. Claude will be here. We are going to be discussing Spike Lee's great Do the Right Thing on Whining About Movies tomorrow. I will be on John Campea's show, I would assume, if there's any news to talk about, and then I will be back for Robservations and Whining About Movies. I want to thank everybody once again for being a great audience. What a fun day this was, even though it is hot as heck in here. I've got an air conditioner in here, but it gets to the point where being in the Robservatory, there's only so much an air conditioner can do when it's that hot outside. So what can you do? Anyway, thank you all for that. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, as always, have a better day. And I will, by the way, be on a podcast tonight discussing Star Trek 4. I don't know if it's live or is it Memorex. I'm not sure. But thanks very much. I'll see you mañana.